Thank you very much for your attention. I'd like to call this meeting to order. The full authority meeting for Wednesday, March 20, here in Balls Falls. I'd like to welcome you all here today, and just like to highlight that on my right is our new interim CAO, who has done great work, and I'll speak a little bit more to that later. But Gail Wood, we welcome to the front. And on my left, we have interim clerk Grant. So we're very excited to have him clerk the meeting this morning. So we will speak more to that a little bit later as well. Before us, we have a very full agenda, and it's in the direction that NPCA is excited to go, the actual work of conducting conservation authority. And so we're very pleased. You got your packages. I hope you read through them thoroughly, that you have your questions ready. We have a tight meeting that we want to wrap up in and around 12 o'clock, so that because we start to lose members and we have other engagements. So just so you're aware of that, we want to be rigid on that. Before us, we have the adoption of the agenda. Item 1, are there any additions to the agenda? And I have a motion moved by Member Zalepa, seconded by Member Wright, that the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority agenda March 20 revision be amended to include as item 4.3.12 the addition of correspondence from Dr. John Bacher dated January 19 regarding official plan amendment 128 Niagara Falls Riverfront Community at Thundering Waters. Do I have any questions or comments? Member Johnson.
Yep, thank you. And I did send an email around prior to this meeting asking that we have a fulsome presentation about the Thundering Waters. We know that that's, and I understand that the simple answer was yes, we will. So
okay.
I just want to put that out there for the public record that we will be having a presentation about this whole file. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions about adding this to the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. All right. Any other additions to items on the agenda? Any change in orders of the items on the agenda? Member Johnson.
It's basically about the agenda. As you all know, it comes with a big clip.
Yes.
Unfortunately for me, the clip fell apart and it went all over the floor, and the numbering system on this agenda is absolutely, it's mind-boggling. I need something a little bit more simple, and I would love it if all the topics were grouped together and not spread out throughout the agenda. Because when I tried to match up, the numbering system does not match up to the agenda.
Okay.
So
I'm
just
a
friendly
ask
about this, because I understand this is how we've been doing things in the past. It's no reflection on the new staff.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much. Excellent concern. We do, excuse me, we have a program in place where the agenda will be assembled in a much more logical and numbered, paged. So if your clip falls apart, you won't have this problem. We also would like to move to an electronic agenda for you for those who want an electronic copy versus a hard copy. I can assure you that our new interim clerk was as concerned about this as anybody was. So if you could just bear with us for this one meeting, we'd appreciate that.
Thank you. Member Whalen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the vein of conservation, is there a chance we can go technical and get these emailed to us and save?
Yeah, well, we're working on that. We're going to work on that, but we're not going to deal with that today.
Yes,
for today, we were, going with old and safe.
Thank you.
I have another motion moved by Member Beattie, seconded by Member Kyokyo, that the order in the items NPCA full authority agenda for March 20 be approved as amended. Seeing no comments or questions, all those in favor? And that's carried. Is that the adoption? That was the adoption. Okay, so we have an agenda. Any disclosure of pecuniary or conflict of interest? Seeing none. We have a presentation at this time from our interim CAO, Gail Wood. It was very important for us to have a summary orientation still yet, believe it or not. And so we're going to rectify that at this time. So if you can take it away.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the Board of Directors, and members of the public. Absolutely, I just wanted to reflect for a moment and first of all say thank you very much for being so welcoming to me. But one of the first things that should have happened for you as a brand new Board of Directors is a very complete orientation session. Most conservation authorities have at least a half day, if not a full day orientation session. Because we don't have that amount of time right now, we're going to at least start with a little bit of an overview of the Conservation Authority, and then perhaps we can either have an additional session at your direction, or we can have little snippets of presentations at future meetings on some of our key program areas. So, thank you for the opportunity to address you, because we do have a full agenda this morning. I've been asked to really go through this quickly, and I'd like to start off by just introducing me. I was laughing with a few people out front. With every media interview that you saw with me, the picture of me got younger and younger. This was me back at Lake Simcoe Conservation Authority about vintage 2015. I would like to tell you that I do have a Bachelor of Environmental Studies from the University of Waterloo, and I did my undergraduate thesis on lake and watershed management. I also have certificates in alternative dispute resolution and strategic and business management and planning from 2 other universities. I started out working with both the Ministry of the Environment and the Ministry of Natural Resources, but I've spent the majority of my time and my career with conservation authorities, including 10 years at the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority in a variety of positions. I've worked a little bit in the private sector, but I was the Chief Administrative Officer for 3 conservation authorities in Ontario, the Ganaraska in Port Hope, the Lake Simcoe for 20 years in Newmarket, and finally in just outside Barrie, the Nottawasaga. And I'm currently involved both internationally. I continue to be with Watershed Management and a number of different charities. So my life right now is very full. I'd like to chat with you a little bit up front and on some of the preliminaries, and you may forgive me if I go right back to what's a watershed. But fundamentally, when you're here as a board member, I know you are representing your municipalities. I understand that. But predominantly, your fiduciary responsibility is to take off that municipal hat and look at the watershed and act in the better interests of the watershed. So let's take a quick look at our watershed, the Conservation Authorities Act, some of the provincial acts that we need to adhere to, our key service areas, the role of the board, and the office of the CAO. I apologize that it's a beautiful room, but I apologize if the screen is a little bit light for everybody. So, Conservation Authorities Act was established in 1946. And I know that I've often heard from people that conservation authorities were created in response to Hurricane Hazel. They were not. The Act was created in 1946. Hurricane Hazel didn't happen until 1954. I know, because I was born before Hurricane Hazel happened. But we were created in 1959. Several authorities in the province were created before us. Our watershed is 24 square kilometers in size. We include all of the region of Niagara, the 21% of the city of Hamilton, and 25% of Haldimand County. And I was privileged enough this morning to do a very brief interview with a gentleman from Hamilton. And I want to assure everybody that Hamilton and Haldimand are just as important to this watershed as the region of Niagara. Hamilton and Haldimand protect our headwater areas, and they play an extremely important role, as does the region of Niagara. Everybody's in this together. We service approximately 500,000 people. We're governed by you, the Board of Directors, and we know that the region of Niagara right now is continuing to look at the composition of the board and how they want to take a look at the future Board of Directors. And we are primarily funded by municipal tax levies. I would love at some point in time in the future to go over how we were funded in the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s in particular, because you would be shocked by the amount of provincial funds that were given to conservation authorities back then. In the amount of, say, for example, if we were dealing with a land acquisition, we would get 75 cents on the dollar for a piece of land acquisition from the province. If we were doing floodplain mapping, we would get 50 cents on the dollar from the federal government, 40 cents on the dollar from the provincial government, and 10 cents on the dollar from all the municipalities, say, on the Welland River together. I mean, it has shifted dramatically how we are funded since our creation in 1959. What's a watershed? Again, it seems pretty simple. It's an area of land that water flows into, across of, and discharges into a certain area. But we also in Ontario, especially since the Walkerton tragedy in the year 2000, have been really focusing on groundwater as well, because that's extremely important in addition to surface water. This is our jurisdiction. It is a complex jurisdiction, and it is a unique jurisdiction in Ontario because we are a peninsula and we are surrounded by water on 3 sides, but not just the fact that we're surrounded by water. We are surrounded by the Great Lakes, and the Great Lakes have specific water quality targets, and we discharge into the Great Lakes. And what we do in the land in the Niagara Peninsula is going to impact the Great Lakes and the Great Lakes water quality. As I indicated, we have 3 primary municipalities: the region of Niagara, City of Hamilton, and Haldimand County. I like this map because if you take a look at the colors, it will show you that we have basically 3 different drainage areas in Niagara. The one at the bottom in the green is the watercourses that discharge into Lake Erie. In the middle, we have the pink, which is basically the Welland River that discharges into the Niagara River. And at the top, we have the yellow, and those are the watercourses that come off the Niagara Escarpment. They tend to be very different and characteristic than the Welland River, and they discharge into Lake Ontario. Again, just a reiteration that we do have 3 municipalities, and Haldimand and Hamilton are the protectors of our wonderful headwater areas, including the Welland River, and everybody plays a very important role in this watershed. We are dictated by the Conservation Authorities Act, and I can tell you, having been in this business for 40 years, the Conservation Authorities Act undergoes a provincial or public review at least once a decade. And we've just moved through one and just landed on that a couple of years ago. And despite that, I'd also want to demonstrate at the end of this agenda, you'll see a report that's talking about our interaction with the province of Ontario. Just as the province right now is looking at your municipalities and how you are structured, the province is also looking at the conservation authorities of Ontario. So our interaction at the provincial level right now is extremely important in relation to our act. What makes us unique, of course, is the Auditor General's report, but not solely unique. When I worked for the Nottawasaga Conservation Authority in 2014 to 2016, I was brought in specifically to look at an operational audit that was done for that authority with 42 recommendations for change. Some of them not all that dissimilar to what you're dealing with here. So although you've had the AG report, a lot of authorities have had to deal with some of the issues that you're dealing with. So we'll get through them, and we'll get through them with our community, with our member municipalities, and with everybody that's interested in how we proceed in the future. We are also prescribed to a number of different regulations and acts. Everything from how we deal with our human resources, to how we deal with our water, to how we deal with health and safety, to how we deal with the Ministry of Labor. We deal with the same number of pieces of legislation that you as municipalities basically deal with. However, you can characterize our programs in 3 different areas. First of all, developing and implementing people to protect from life and hazards associated with flooding. And I had a really interesting conversation with folks this morning that were here from the public for the meet and greet, and they were talking to us about the flood lines and certainly wanting to communicate with us better when we change and update our flood lines, and understanding and listening to their concerns about flood lines and communicating how better we calculate our flood lines and protect property from flood hazards. Secondly, this pardon me, this conservation authority has some spectacular conservation areas. Excuse me. I did have the pleasure when I was working with Niagara many years ago to be not just the director of watershed management, but the director of land management. And to go out to our spectacular properties was always a distinct pleasure. And then, of course, we provide comments to municipalities on applications that are occurring within the peninsula. That is just top line what we do. These are what we call our flagship properties. You will be hearing a little bit more about some of them later today. But these are about as stunning as any conservation authority can have. We do have a strategic plan. My apologies. We have a strategic plan. It is currently focused to 2021, but you know what? Next year, this board's going to have to start thinking about regenerating its strategic plan and heading into the new board of directors after the next election. So I want to end the presentation very quickly by saying we have a number of key service areas in this authority: corporate services, land management, water management, and the office of the CAO. This is our, and I don't expect you to be looking at this intently, this is our org chart. The reason that I bring this to you is right now we have a number of key HR challenges. We have some leaves of absence, we've had some people that have recently left, and we have some pending retirements. This is a heads up for the board of directors that this structure needs to be looked at. And I certainly hope that you give me the blessing as the interim CAO and somebody that's dealt with a lot of structures over the years, the blessing to take a look at this, even though I'm interim, and give you best advice. Because we have some HR challenges. Under corporate services, we have administration, communication, human resources, IT/GIS, community engagement, and ecological monitoring. Under land management, we do strategic initiatives, education programming, events, operations, special projects, and capital projects. And let's not forget our weddings that happen out here. Right, Adam? Watershed management, we do water quality monitoring, flood and erosion risk management, planning and development, forestry, water quality improvement, source water protection, and the Niagara River Remedial Plan. This is not the conservation authorities of the 1960s where we're just doing tree planting. This is a very complex environmental programming with some very technical issues that we have to deal with. So, coming up, what are you going to hear from us? Annual budget approval. We need to start preparing for 2020 pretty soon. Auditor General's report. The chair has asked that the Auditor General be invited to hopefully the April meeting to bring you up to speed on that report. We have policy reviews and revisions and approvals, quarterly and annual financial reports. We have the auditor, our manager of finance is here today. We have our auditor coming in April. We have management plans to deal with, minutes to deal with for the various committees that you're involved with, legislative issues to deal with, human resources to deal with, freedom of information requests to deal with, and then the awards and the nice events that also reflect some of the great things that we're doing. So, the Office of the CAO, myself, we're here to provide guidance and support to the Board of Directors. Implement your direction, and we carry out the operations that you advise us to do, business planning, and also deal with orientation and a member's handbook. I don't know if you got your member's handbook, but the member's handbook needs updating. It was good only until 2018. Staff are working on updating the members' handbook for you now, which contains a lot of key information on things that you will be dealing with. Mr. Chair and the Board of Directors, thank you for listening to me today. I said I'd be done in 15 minutes. I ran a little bit overboard, but I would welcome any questions that the board might have.
Thank you very much, and I hope from that presentation that you get a sense of the speed with which we were going to conduct the rest of this meeting. But at the same time, there was a huge download of information, maybe a little bit overwhelming, but I felt that it was necessary that we start this full authority meeting with something that's long overdue. Are there any comments or questions at this time for CAO Wood? Seeing none, I thank you, CAO, for that presentation. Again, I thought I knew everything. I learned some more again, and so I thank you for that. And we will continue to grow and learn, absolutely. There are no delegations scheduled for this meeting, so we have approval of, we're at 4.1. 4.1.1 is full authority meeting dated February 20, 2019. I have a moved by Member Beattie, seconded by Member Kiokio, that the minutes of the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority full authority meeting dated February 20, 2019 be adopted as presented. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that is carried. Moving on, we have business arising from minutes. We have none at this time, so we're going to move on to 4.3.1, Niagara Region appointments to the NPCA board dated December 17th, 2018. Okay, so you have that before us. It's correspondence received for information. Okay. Okay, so there will be a staff report later on in the agenda on that. So do we just move them? Just tell me how to move them as just to receive it in the record. Okay, just receive in the record. Is that what it is? That's what that is. Okay, sorry. So it's moved by Member Kiokio, seconded by Member Zalepa, that the following be received for information. Okay, so here we go. We're doing them all together. There we go. 4.3.1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes. Member Metcalf.
Quick question. 4.3.3, Haldeman appointment to the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority.
Yes.
Our letter dated the 20th of December. There's follow-up correspondence. Councillor Corbett, Grand River, and I am now here with the Niagara Peninsula.
Was there was a subsequent? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. As you can see, board members, we're going through a backdating of correspondence that we can find that didn't yet arrive for the Board of Directors. If that one is not on the agenda, we certainly will have received it, or we will search it through, our clerk will, and ensure that it's in the office and on the agenda to be received at your April meeting. And thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Member Shurton?
Yeah, just to follow up on that, on Councillor Metcalf, or Member Metcalf. So it would be probably, I would think, in January when that decision.
Yeah.
So it might have been mid-January that there should be correspondence, and if not, maybe Member
Bible.
Yeah, could maybe follow up with Evelyn from Haldeman. Thanks.
We have seen it somewhere. Okay, so these are the correspondence all the way down to 4.3.11. And any other comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that is carried. Okay, so the correspondence that was received, that was added at the beginning of the agenda, moved by Member Kiokio, seconded by Member Zalepa, that the correspondence from Dr. John Bacher, dated January 19, 2019, regarding an official plan amendment 128 Niagara Falls Riverfront Community at Thundering Waters be received And that 2, the matter be forwarded to the Director of Watershed Management for consideration and response. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that too is carried. Yes.
I'm sorry, again, going back to the numbering system is throwing me right off. We have a letter dated March the 4th, 2019. I can't find it on the agenda at all. And it's written by the Niagara region, and it's about the environmental planning function review. Where, oh, there it is, sorry, 4.3.8. Can I just respond to that? Can I ask a couple of questions? Sorry.
Yeah,
or we've
okay.
already passed it, sorry. My understanding is that at one time the NPCA was taking care of. They were looking at the planning reviews on the region's behalf, and this is in respect to natural heritage interests and stormwater management, et cetera, et cetera. The funding was provided by the region to the NPCA to support this role, and then in September 2017, the NPCA turned that responsibility back to the region. My question is, does the NPCA still oversee any applications coming forward, whether it be in Hamilton, Haldimand, or Niagara, with respect to natural heritage and environmental ESAs, etc.?
I will go refer to the CAO for that answer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Conservation authorities are required to enter into memorandums of understanding with municipalities to provide advice on natural heritage features, not natural hazards. Natural hazards, which are basically floodplain, we have the lead role in Ontario. So in relation to Niagara region, my understanding was, and I was not present at the time, that there were discussions with the region that the region would prefer to handle that review of natural heritage features through their own opportunity. Regions really have, and sorry for the long-winded answer, this is extremely important. A municipality can contract advice out on natural heritage either to their own staff, to a conservation authority, or to consultant. Most municipalities have memorandums of understanding with conservation authorities to provide advice on natural heritage. And my understanding right now is that the region, through the region of Niagara, we don't have that memorandum. In relation to Hamilton and Haldimand, our Director of Watershed Management is here, and I don't know if he can update us on Hamilton and Haldimand, because I've not been able to research that yet. So just to finalize, Mr. Chair, if I can, I would certainly like the opportunity to meet with our 3 participating municipalities, Hamilton, Haldimand, and Niagara, and take a look at this. I am an advocate that conservation authorities can provide unique natural heritage advice on a watershed basis to our municipalities. Ultimately, it's your decision as municipalities as to if you'd like to enter an agreement with us or not, but staff would certainly like the opportunity to meet with your municipalities and have further discussions on this matter.
And thank you very much for that, Gail, and through you, Chair, because when I see the red flags show up that we had some stakeholders come together and say, well, we don't need the NPCA involved anymore. That's what I was reading in this. So I would love to be able to have the opportunity to direct our staff and make the motion to direct our staff to have that conversation with all 3 municipalities. As Darren said earlier, they want to mimic the MOU with but there is no MOU anymore. So I would like to establish that again, so we've got the NPCA more involved in some of these planning applications to make sure that that all our environmental and sensitive areas are preserved.
Thank you. So we passed a resolution to, so thank you for those comments, and they were noted, and there's notes being taken. Item 4.4, As Chairman remarks, I have a few that I'd like to get off my chest. The first that I'd like to address is to welcome CAO, interim CAO Gail Wood to the position. And I would just like to, the public had an opportunity to meet with Gail this morning. The board has an opportunity also to meet and interact with Ms. Wood going forward. But I would just like to say that the culture at headquarters, the culture around the NPC has greatly improved. I've received numerous comments, numerous praise from staff, and I just like to assure the board that that this transitional period with our interim CAO is going very smoothly. And I think that the meeting that we're having here today is going to reflect the stability that Ms. Gailwood has brought to the position of interim CAO. So that was my first comment, and thank you very much for taking the role. The second event that I'd like to highlight was on February 27th at Club Castro Pignano. I think I'm pronouncing that. Don't have an Italian bone, but thanks, Mr. Member Kyokyo. We had an awards evening, and I think sometimes we've been distracted as a board. What I'd like to highlight to the board as a whole is sometimes we are mistaken into thinking that what happens in this room is what the NPCA is all about. And I want to just highlight that Member Greenwood, Member Foster and his wife, myself, had an opportunity to engage the public at an awards evening that I think really put a different flavor on what the NPCA is all about. It was the fun evening. It's the good things that the NPCA are doing. The volunteers. There was a young man, I think he was 15, received an award for over 100 hours of volunteer work. Now, you know, the high schools require 40 hours. So this kid, young man, has done far beyond and exceeded because of his love for the environment, for conservation. There's a volunteer on this site who does diligent work for many, countless hours. It was eye-opening for Member Greenwood, Member Foster, myself, and Vice Chair Houston. That was the fourth one. I didn't write the list. Member Vice Chair Houston was there as well, and it really put a different flavor on the good work that is being done by our staff and by our community. So I just wanted to highlight that. It was a worthwhile event, and next year when this event happens again, for those members who are still present, I'd strongly encourage you to engage because it really refocuses what we're doing here at this executive level, but really what the grassroots are doing in this organization. And the third thing that I'd like to highlight was we had a meeting last week with respect to the foundation. And I know the foundation has been the concern of the public, of members around this table, but we had to sit down with some of the members. Member Encina was there, Vice Chair Houston was there again, Member Foster was there. We sat down with CAO Gail Wood and some of those involved, Andrea Crosby from the foundation, and we had an opportunity to kind of stabilize. It had gone dormant. It has not folded by any direction, but we had to provide some stability. So there are some motions that are coming forward in this meeting and ongoing that will provide stability for the foundation so that the public can be assured that this good work that's also being undertaken by the NPCA is ongoing. And so I just wanted to highlight for the board at this time that that's taking place, and rest assured we will get that repaired as well over time and hopefully in quick order. So thank you very much for the opportunity to share those comments. I'd like to pass the floor over to the CAO for comments that you would like to make at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief. I too have 3 comments. First of all, to the Board of Directors, I would like to express my deepest thanks for your confidence in me. I am very excited to have this position. I have lived in the Niagara Peninsula since I graduated from university in 1977, and this Conservation Authority has always held a very soft spot in my heart, and I really cherish the opportunity to help work with you to put this Conservation Authority on a new and exciting path forward. So thank you. Number two, I would like to tell you that the staff that I have met and worked with in the last 2 weeks have been nothing short of stellar. They're dedicated, they are professional, they are hardworking, and they have been deeply impacted by what has transpired at this Conservation Authority. They are anxious to work with you, to turn the path, to have a new and exciting future. A few of the staff are here today. They have been my guidepost over the last couple of weeks. I can't express to you how deeply appreciative I am. And of course, our new clerk who landed here 2 days ago and is now keeping me on the straight and narrow in relation to the agenda, and we promise you that you will have a tightened agenda in the future. Finally, it was a wonderful opportunity to meet with the public today through a meet and greet. I want to hear your concerns, and I've heard them this morning. I heard concerns about floodplains. I've heard concerns about the environment. I've heard concerns about transparency. I've heard concerns about accountability. And I also had an opportunity to have a media interview with a press member from Hamilton who was concerned about some Hamilton-related issues. I want to hear them all, and my team wants to hear them all. We're here to be open and accountable to you, the public, who basically provides the tax dollar that drives this Conservation Authority to do good and environmental work. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much again for this opportunity, and we look forward to an exciting future.
Yeah, we do. Thank you for those comments. Moving on in our agenda, 5.1 is a communications report. I have a motion here moved by Member Wright and seconded by Member Zalepa that the communications update report FA-17-19 be received for information. Any comments or quick? Go ahead, Member Wright.
Testing?
Go ahead.
If you could put the dates on the media interviews and the media releases, that would be appreciated so we get the chronological order. I'm assuming it is in chronological order, but that would help, that's all. Thank you very much.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that is carried. Okay, thank you. Moving on, item 6.1, Standing Committee Reports, 6.1.1, CAO Selection Committee. I have moved by Member Zalepa. I'm looking for a seconder. Member Johnson. That CAO Selection Committee meeting minutes dated February 26th be adopted. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that is carried. Yeah, okay. Oh, I see. There's the feet on the other corner. Moving on, 6.2 reports, 6.2.1 formal appointment of the interim CEO select. So this is a bit of a housekeeping item. But I have a motion moved by members that report FA-18-19 respecting the formal appointment of the interim CEO Secretary's Treasurer be received, and that further Ms. D. Gail Woods' appointment as interim CAO Secretary Treasurer in accordance with the board direction provided to the chair on February 25th, 2019 be approved, and that further Ms. Wood be approved as the signing officer of the NPCA during her approved contract period, and that Ms. Wood be approved to hire contract staff to fill temporary vacancies during the period of her contract. I'm looking for a seconder. Member Steele. Yes, of course. Are there any comments or questions? Before I go to comments or questions, I'd just like to go to the CAO, interim CAO for an opening salvo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When this resolution was prepared, I was preparing this report under the direction that the board had given back in January that no hirings, changes, firings, etc., be done until a permanent CAO was hired. Although this staff report says hiring contract staff, I'd like to bring to the board's attention that we do have some pending retirements. The retirements were in schedule. These people have assured me they're not retiring because of my arrival here. And we have also had some staff that have moved on to other jobs. They have to be replaced as part of the organizational structure, and I do need to have the board's consensus that we need to advertise for those positions that are permanent, that are part of the organizational structure, even though I am the interim CAO.
Member Shurton.
Thank you. Through the chair, just a couple things, maybe for the public. It's my understanding it's a 5-month interim, and maybe also for the public, if Gail would comment, or in the committee, what is the timelines of maybe when permanent may be appointed? Are we going to be able to meet that 5-month window? And maybe just a comment or two. Thanks.
We don't know, obviously, we can't predict the future. What I would just like to highlight is the CAO selection committee met briefly just before this full authority meeting and concluded the first chunk of our CAO selection mandate, which is to secure a firm. So later on in this report, you will be seeing, or later on in this meeting, you'll be seeing the fruits of the CAO selection committee, which is to secure that third-party search firm. Then once that's engaged, the firms pretty consistently had a 10 to 12 week unfolding of their plans to find that permanent. So hopefully those are, there's enough information in those two comments with respect to that.
That's important for the public to know that as well, so thank you.
Thank you. Member Zalepa?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. As the mover of this motion, I'd just like to amend it, the recommendation 4, so that we would amend that to say Ms. Wood be approved to hire contract staff to fill temporary vacancies and to hire full-time positions as necessary during your period of the contract. And I wouldn't mind speaking to it if you give me permission to do that.
You still have the floor. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I would move that because my concern previously is remedied now. So I'm comfortable with what we've done, and I'm comfortable in the role that Ms. Wood has, and so I'd like to do that. So.
Okay, so can I get a seconder for, okay, and I'm going to go with Member Metcalf with the amendment. I'm just going to let the clerk catch up. Yeah. Okay, so we have that as amended. Any other comments or questions on the, so on the amendment, all those in favor? And that's carried, so it's been amended. The resolution as amended, any further? Member Beattie. Oh, okay, sorry. I was asking for comments or questions, but he's already, so seeing no other comments or questions, all those in favor of the amended motion, thank you. And that's carried. Moving right along, report 6.2.2, interim CAO Secretary Treasurer's Work Plan Priorities, report FA 1919. Moved by Member Zalepa. I'm looking for a seconder. Member Kiokio. That report, FA 1919, respecting the interim CAO Secretary Treasurer's work plan priorities be received and the work plan priorities therein approved. Any comments or questions? Member Wright.
I just have a comment on the item number 1 in the discussion that says, and ensure stabilization. I think I know what you're getting at, but the engineer in me says, ensure the stabilization of what? The details. and for instance, I look at, the CEO has just mentioned that she'd like to have participate in the reorganization of the structure of the NPCA. And if you said ensure a stabilization of the organizational structure, you're actually implying that she won't have a hand in that. And I'd like to see her to be able to actually help with that aspect. When you look at the bullets there, it actually addresses the first part of that, which is improved communication, but it doesn't actually speak too much to the ensure stabilization. So if there could be some clarity or even remove the ensure stabilization or discussion or comment.
It could be bank stabilization too, but I'm going to let the team.
Okay, so if you could comment on that, I'd much appreciate it.
Would speak to that. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Member Wright, excellent point. The stabilization really addresses human resource issues. As you can understand, we do have a union. There are union issues that must be addressed, and that leads to stabilization. It's not just communication, but there is a need for, I think, staff to not feel like the rug is going to be pulled out from underneath them again. And I think when you work in an environment where you're not sure who's going to be there the next day, who may be leaving, who might be staying, is your job going to be secure, it leads to a very destabilized environment, and people are simply not productive under that environment. So the staff need to know that that we're moving in the right course, and that right now there is no, I certainly have no marching orders to deal with any dismissals, nor do I have any appetite for that. And that's what stabilization is really all about, so people can land, feel secure in what they're doing, and focus on their jobs. So succinctly, I guess I should say, resolving union issues, resolving legal issues that I know you're aware of, and just getting the staff focused on doing their job and not being concerned about any HR issues that could impact their job and their working environment.
Through you, Mr. Chair, is it possible to maybe put some clarification in the plan then on that, if it's...
Yes.
Okay.
Anyways.
It's on the record. Okay, yep.
Yes.
We'll put some... Member Kyokyo, you had...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had the same comments as Member Wright. It was about the HR, and I wanted to see the morale go up, and it sounds like you're doing a great job of working towards that. But in the beginning, your presentation, you said if you didn't mind giving us feedback on your organizational chart, and I think HR is part of that chart. I think needs to be looked at, and I know the way some of the things would happen in the past and how it's been organized, I disagreed with, and I'm hoping that you'd be able to come back to us and provide some good input on how that chart should look like.
Okay, thank you. Member Height.
Yes. Meeting with the staff to discuss programs and issues. I hope that there are frank conversations with all of the staff, not just about their program, but what's gone on and what should be going on in the future to make this a better NPCA, I think is important. And number two, improve relationships with municipalities, MPPs. And I was looking for the Auditor General in this document, and I don't see them singled out. And they should be one that is individually singled out because they've singled us out. So there should be two-way communications with them before they even come and present to us. Those are my comments.
Yeah, thank you. And I would love to see that org chart. I would love to see where the gaps are. I'd love to see what you're willing to fill and what can wait, the whole bit. I'd really like to see that. As a new member, it would just be interesting to put the names to the faces as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's great to see that we're moving in the right direction. Now, there's no mention on here about the forensic audit that we asked for also to see what stability is of the NPCA.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair to the board member, yes, that was something that was brought up at the February board meeting, and my recommendation is later on when we're dealing with committees and advisory committees, standing committees, and et cetera, that motion be directed to, I believe it's the governance committee, not being a party to that motion or being here at the time, and in discussion with the staff, we certainly need to have a clearer understanding. The manager of finance and I, a clearer understanding with regard to the intent of the board in terms of forensic, and also the intent of the board in terms of an HR audit. So my request to you is to have that directed to that committee for discussion, that committee that is chaired by Councillor Clark is meeting on March 27th, and if that's your intent, I would like to put that on the agenda for that committee.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? And that is carried. Moving right along, item 6.2.3, Conservation Authority, Conservation Ontario appointees. I have a motion that report FA 2019 appointing the chair and vice chair as voting and alternate delegates for Conservation Ontario be approved on an interim basis until the final board of directors is constituted in 2019. It's moved by member Greenwood and seconded by, come on, I think it's member Whalen. That's Gibson. Okay, there we go. Member Gibson. Whalen, Gibson, practically the same. If you have one of those signatures, just for the sake of clarity, just put even the first three letters of your... You cleaned it up. Oh, thank you very much. Any comments or questions? Member Johnson.
Yeah, and given that the CAO's position is interim, this is why we're doing this, but my understanding is also that the chair and vice chair could also be interim. Is the Conservation Ontario appointees, would they allow the fact that it would just be an interim basis?
Yep.
Good, thank you.
And it's important to engage Conservation Ontario, and so that's, we're delighted to be sent if you care. All those in favor? And that is carried. Put them there, beautiful. Yeah, right. Okay, the status, 6.2.4, status of the NPCA committees. The motion reads that report FA 21-19 regarding the status of NPCA committees be received, and further that the budget and audit committees be blended with new terms of reference to be approved by the April Board of Directors meeting, and that further the following members be appointed to the budget and audit committee in addition to vice chair, chair, vice chair, regional councillor Zalepa, board member Wright, and councillor Metcalf. I have that motion moved by, look at this, moved by member Gibson and seconded by member Greenwood. I would like to, at this point, just go to the Miss Gilwood for first comment, and then we'll open the floor to questions. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a brief comment that if there has been a committee on here that I have missed, please forgive me. We did some research. We found out what committees were created by the last Board of Directors and which were created by this Board of Directors. If I might, just on the Audit and Budget Committee, first of all, our staffing right now, we are particularly missing a number of senior staff, and up until recently a clerk. So resourcing our committees, we will do that, and it will be a bit of a challenge for us right now. So that's why I've tried to prioritize the committees for our review in Q2 and moving into Q3. Because our auditor is coming in April and needs to appear before a committee, before the Board of Directors, it just makes sense to merge the Audit and Budget Committee. And also, while we are dealing with what I'm proposing to be Audit and Budget Committee, you'll see later on in your agenda, we're talking about an earlier and more consultative approach on our budgeting with member municipalities. Your municipalities start their budgeting, as you know, June, July, and we need to be engaged in budgeting around that time too, which means that we need to get this committee constituted. In addition, in my meet and greet this morning with some of the community members, they took me to task on how I placed a priority on the Watershed Floodplain Committee, and I think they're quite correct. As a matter of fact, my Director of Watershed Management did advise me after I had done this report that there is floodplain mapping issues that will be emerging, if you will, this summer in terms of consultation needed with the community on our floodplains. So I think that, Mr. Chair, after you deal with that motion, I do believe it would be proper if there are board members that would be interested in reconstituting the floodplain committee. It does appear to be a little bit more important a priority than the fourth quarter that I put on here. So my recommendation to you, Mr. Chair, is to deal with this motion, and then if the board is in agreement with my recommendation to constitute a floodplain committee as well.
Okay, so the motion before us is dealing with the Audit and Budget Committees. Any other comments or questions on it? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that is carried. So is that next? Or is that just part of your direction?
That is a recommendation. If the board members require more discussion on why we would need that committee, our Director of Watershed Management is here and can briefly address what's being developed this summer in terms of floodplains. However, there was no formal motion prepared because it was just brought to my attention this morning by members of the public that the need for a floodplain committee is a little bit more eminent than I had anticipated.
Could we just direct staff to come back in April? Is that basically what you're going to say? Member John, what were you going to say?
It was actually to establish the Watershed Floodplain Committee today. If we have any volunteers right now, I would move that motion. I don't have the time to be on the committee, but I'm happy to move the motion to voluntold any of you.
Voluntold, thank you. Member Shurton?
Knowing that there's a few members not present today, I would like to see it put on for April and then get it moving then, and then maybe send out to the members who weren't here about the need for this committee to be formed at our next meeting. That'd be my suggestion.
And they could volunteer if their services, yeah, okay. So staff will take that direction and come back in April on that committee. Okay, thank you very much. Moving right along, 6.2.5. I have a motion here that report FA 2219 regarding the draft proposed budget process for 2020 budget be received, and further that the draft proposed budget process for 2020 be forwarded to the Budget Committee for review, revision, and recommendation, and forwarded for approval at the April Board of Directors meeting. I have it moved by Member Gibson and seconded by Member Greenwood. Any comments or questions? I think this is a great move, and it's going to facilitate the approval of our apportionments when those come to the municipalities in the fall. So, any other comments, questions? All those in favor? And that is carried. Oh, we are in such a groove, I can't express. 6.2.6. The motion reads, the report FA 23-19 pertaining to the Thomas Solutions Inc. bid for NPCA fleet support be received, and that NPCA Board of Directors authorize the interim CAO Secretary Treasurer to enter into a 5-year agreement awarding Thomas Solutions Inc. to be the NPCA's fleet service provider. It has been moved by Member Greenwood. It has been seconded by I believe that's Member Height. I saw Brian, I read Brian, and I made out a, okay, so Member Height. Thank you very much. Comments or questions? Member Shurton?
And I know, I guess this decision was made in the previous board, but I guess my question, knowing what Haldimand County does and maybe other municipalities, is there a reason why we don't buy it and we find leasing is a better way? That would be my question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will rely on staff a little bit for this, but I also wanted to assure the board members, I know that procurement was an issue that was raised by the Auditor General. We do have our new procurement coordinator in the audience and our manager of finance, and I can certainly assure you that this followed procurement processes as prescribed by the Auditor General, and we can address that if you wish. My understanding is that this is a more fiscally appropriate response, but to our fleet management is to lease rather than buy, but I would ask the manager of finance if he could address that, Mr. Chair, to the board.
Is there one mic there?
Microphone, please.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. No, there's no problem.
Thank you. Yes, there was an analysis done back, I believe, in 2014 or 15, which we found when we were reviewing the contract with the Auditor General. And the analysis was to lease or buy. It was very clear that the lease was a much more preferred like a decision based on the financial benefit of it. So the issue then was, it wasn't like the way that it was procured wasn't really procured properly. It was sole sourced. So that's why the issue came up with the Auditor General. So we thought, okay, we would address this one, which we did, and it went through a proper process. It was posted on the Merck's website and so on for 26 days, and you know, we did our diligence there. But as far as the lease or buy option, that was analyzed back about 4 years ago, and I think we see that a lot more municipalities are going that way. Vehicles are becoming almost disposable. There's a lot of other costs involved with owning, maintenance, and so on, that when you weigh the option, it seems to work for us. Like, you know, our vehicles also are off-road sometimes and this sort of thing, so, you know, it's not just driving on a nice paved road all the time. So these are the kind of vehicles that our procurement specialist requested, and I think it's a good result in front of you.
Okay, and I had Member Johnson, then I'll go to Member Johnson.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just out of curiosity, I see the F-150s. I understand that could be used for conservation areas and things like that. But when we were on our tour last week for all the intakes and all the stuff that we went through, we were sitting in a really nice, modern SUV. Have we looked at this list to see whether it's necessary to complete this list? That's my first question. And my second question is, we have vehicles here that are 8 and 9 years old, and we're paying $800 a month for them. So that's my other question.
I'm going to direct that to Ms. Wood.
I will address, if I can, the really nice SUV, and can be corrected by my staff. I believe that was a vehicle that the former CAO, utilized. That has been taken back. It is no longer with this Conservation Authority. And while I do have the microphone, because I know this is of interest to the community, I am not on a $1,000 expense. I have mileage that is 50 cents kilometer, and I drive my own vehicle. So the nice vehicle that you were in, we took it back after the Source Protection Authority committee meeting. As to your second question, through the chair to Member Johnson, may I ask one of the staff members to address that issue regarding fleet? That would be our procurement officer, Eric.
Maybe that mic is available to you to answer.
And thank you. And where's Eric? So Eric, I'm looking at the list and I'm seeing a Ford Escape. It's 9 years old, and we are paying $645. Then I'm looking at 2 other Ford F-150s. They're 8 and 9 years old, and they're at $800 a month. I don't know, maybe I don't lease my car, but I see a lot of advertisements, and it looks a lot cheaper than this.
Through you, Chair. The current fleet, we're going month to month, and that's the reason why some of these vehicles are quite old. The new contract calls for new vehicles. The F-150s, I believe, are 2019s, and the mid-size SUVs will be as well new vehicles. This contract is negotiable, so the vehicle that you spoke of in regards to the, I believe it was a Ford Explorer, was returned, and I've spoken to the Thomas Solutions sales rep, and we could substitute that with another truck. As our existing owned vehicles come to end of life, we could add new Thomas Solution vehicles to it.
And thank you for that answer. So just through you, Chair, to Eric, if I'm looking at a Ford Explorer, it's 2017, we paid almost $12,000 to rent it out for the year. If you look at a brand new Ford Explorer and how much it costs, does it have to be an Explorer? Can we go with a cheaper model that does exactly the same thing? I don't know. I'm not a car person, so please forgive me.
Absolutely. The contract hasn't been signed, so we can negotiate those details with them.
And find, if you don't mind, if you can ask the staff who are using these vehicles what they need, as opposed to it's wants and needs, right? So it'd lovely to have that backup camera and all this fancy stuff, but what do they need to do their job with? That's where I'd like to come at and see if we can take a look at this budget and see if we can make it a little bit more appetizing. Thanks, Eric.
You're welcome.
Member Gibson, you had a question.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. It's a 5-year contract, I understand. It says it was for the last 5 years, and it looks like we've started a new agreement, or we're in the process of starting a new 5-year contract?
Through you, Chair, yes. It's once the board approves the CEO to sign that agreement, that new agreement will start. Currently, there is no agreement. We're just going month to month.
Okay, once that contract is signed, lots of things can change over 5 years. Is there a back-out clause there or an escape clause of any kind?
I believe so. We could cancel the contract at any time. Some of these vehicles are returned mid-year because we don't use them in the off-season.
Okay, thank you. That was my question.
Member Whalen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just some clarification. There was a 2011 Ford F-150. It looks like it was leased in November 2017. Was it 6 years old when we got it? Is that what I'm reading from this report?
The current agreement some vehicles are returned every year in the fall, and they are released or rented in the spring. So that vehicle that you may have on the list, yes, it was brought back to the fleet back in April.
But we paid 800, through you, Mr. Chair, do we paid 813 for the year?
No, that's per month.
Because it shows a total of 9,700, which probably would equate to a 12-month period at $800 a month.
That's right.
So it's not, that is not the case then?
The $800 a month, I believe, is per month. It's not per year. And this includes all repairs. It's all inclusive.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Member Wright.
So if I'm not mistaken, only one response was on this RFP, and that was Thomas Solutions. Myself, I have a little bit of a problem with that, going with a 5-year program. From my knowledge from before, NPCA had used another provider about five years ago, and I'm surprised that they hadn't put it on, hadn't responded to the RFP. I'm wondering if the other organizations hadn't seen it, because maybe Merck's isn't the appropriate place to actually post this. So I guess that's I'd prefer to see actually a 2-year agreement or something to that effect, as opposed to a 5-year, when there's only one response to the RFP. Like, it almost looks like it's a sole source, even though it is on Merck's. The optics to me doesn't look good. Or maybe keep going by month, and then actually repost it and see if you can get at least three responses to an RFP. I'd prefer something like that where there is a little more competition. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. I don't know if staff wants to answer that. Okay, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
The danger in, through you, Chair, the danger of reposting the RFP is Thomas Solutions had a fair bid. They bid on this RFP on time, and it was on Merck's for 26 days. There was many downloads of the RFP from other firms, but Thomas was the only one that bid on this RFP. So if we do go back out, we would have to change to make some changes to the RFP, what we're looking for. If that's not the solution we're looking for, leasing.
If I could, Mr. Chair, thank you. I do understand your concern, Member Wright. Having been involved in many bids for fleet over the past 27 years with other conservation authorities, it is not uncommon, unfortunately, once you go out to a bid, that you only get one person coming in. So it also is similar with any other procurement process that we undergo, is that you go through the appropriate process, and sometimes you get 3 bids and sometimes you get 1 bid. But I would have to support our procurement officer that it does complicate things right now if we go back out in terms of the same particular bid.
I had member Encina next.
Thank you, Chair. In just looking at some of these numbers and looking at what you're going to get for the price that we're going to pay, you're going to get a vehicle, you're going to get maintenance, you're going to get everything else. So all you have to do is turn the key, and you bring it back if you don't want it. And especially the point where if you're not going to use a vehicle for a certain period of time, they'll take it back. No offense, but I think we're getting a good deal, especially when everything is included. It's a turnkey operation. I personally am, what I've seen in the very recent past is that I'm going to put my faith in these people. And if they believe that they've entered into an agreement that is sound and wise, then you know what? I have to tip my hat to them. And especially if we can get to the point where it's a turnkey operation, if there was a problem with the vehicle, you take it back, you get a new one. I know it's not a question, but thanks for the comment.
Thank you, Member Kiokio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think maybe would have alleviated a lot of discussion if we would have had a comparison of buying and leasing. Maybe in the future we could see something like that. But maybe a question to you, Mr. Chair, to Eric. 3 to 5 years or 5-year agreement. Was that our suggestion in going to 5-year, or is it something that was negotiated with Thomas? I'm just curious if there's a cost savings going to 5 years opposed to 3 years.
It was the decision of the former director that I worked with, Mr. Fertney, that we go for a long term to provide a bigger commitment to these companies that would submit. But unfortunately, we only got one submission, which was Thomas Solutions. Companies like this like to see long-term contracts, not short-term contracts. But it's definitely something we could actually talk to Thomas, perhaps do a 3 years with 2 extension years. I could work with the CEO and we could talk to Thompson about that.
I would probably be comfortable with that if we went 3 years with a 2-year extension if needed. Just in my opinion, seeing that there was only one company that applied for it. I mean, it's up to the board to decide if that's the route they want to take. I just feel more comfortable with going to 3 with a 2-year extension.
I'm going to go to Member Zalepa.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So I'm generally supportive of the process that I've heard, and I want to ask a question, though, with respect to, I see in page 2 of the contract that NPCA is not responsible for any residual fee or cancellation charges. So I guess my question to the staff is, if the contract's canceled, does that mean there's no cancellation fees? Like we could cancel this at any, by giving notice, or I just want some clarity on that language, that's all.
Go ahead.
Through you, Chair, I will get that clarification from Thomas Solution, but that's the motion, the intent of the agreement.
Well, with hearing that, that's pretty open, so I'd like to just move forward with it as it is, and thank you for that.
Seeing no further comments or questions, we're going to call the vote. All those in favor? Yeah, to approve it. Yep. And opposed? And that is carried. Thank you very much. Pardon me. Moving forward, 6.2.7, that report FA 24-19 respecting the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority providing permission for Honaker Aspiring Global Geopark Steering Committee to include all NPCA conservation areas as potential Oniakra Aspiring Global Geopark geosites be received, and that NPCA staff be authorized to continue to participate in the Oniakra Steering Committee as part of our in-kind contribution to the initiative, and that staff be directed to forward a copy of the multi-year agreement providing permission to Oniakra Aspiring Global Geopark Steering Committee to include all NPCA conservation areas as potential Oniakra Aspiring Global Geopark geosites to the Board of Directors for approval, and I have it moved by Councillor or Member Height and seconded by Member Greenwood. Member Height.
Even though I moved it, I have a question and a concern.
Of course you can, yeah.
And I'm not sure if I'm going to vote for it. Number one, under recommendations, I would have hoped to see the financial implication there, or right below it, not on page 3. That's a comment that way people see exactly what this is costing us, if this is costing us anything. And I need clarification because it speaks to putting $12,000 regarding about not being placed in the 219 budget and $12,000 in the 2020 budget. Are you talking in-kind services, or are you talking dollars and cents that we need to put in the budget? Because there is a difference there. If it's our staff time and that's in kind, well, that's great. Some signage that's going to benefit us, that's great. But you're looking at dollars now. Can I get an answer on whether we're talking dollars or in kind?
I'm going to pass the floor over to CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Member Height. For 2019, it is an in-kind donation of staff services. There is no dollars other than staff assigned in 2019. For 2020, we are talking about a potential $12,000 in cash contributions. That would be completely subject to board approval and is part of the proposed 2020 budget. If there are specific questions about the partnership and the worthiness of the partnership, I would direct them to our manager of communications, and I know I don't have her title correctly there, or there are members of the public present from this partnership in the audience. So in kind only, member height for 2019.
Thank you, but for 2020, you're talking $12,000 in the budget. Are you then talking $12,000 per year for the next 100 years, 5 years, 2 years, or is it a one-year commitment? I'm not prepared to sign up for a long-term commitment yet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could please direct that to Renee, our communications manager, that would be much appreciated. Oh,
Adam.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you for the question. Through you, Chair, it will be a one-time $12,000 in cash fee for signage and affiliation costs. One time.
Thank you. That's what I was hoping to hear, that it was going to be signage to promote that we're involved. I have no problems now with the motion.
Great. Any further comments or questions? Member Beattie.
There's a question to the staff. If we agree to this, will it have any impact on Cave Springs and the log jam we face there?
Staff member Bisson's going to answer.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I have a big booming voice. It will have a positive impact, yes. So basically what would happen is our conservation areas, anything that has natural heritage features would be included as sites for tourists to come and visit.
But will it have any impact on the master plan that is stuck somewhere?
I don't believe so. If the master plan were to move forward, and I believe that it would simply just be a matter of signage at the site that would inform the public that this is a geosite.
Oh, that was good. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Uh, 6.2.8. The motion reads that Report FA 25-19 respecting the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority compliance and enforcement officer appointment be received, and 2, that Jason Culp, NPCA Supervisor Compliance and Enforcement, be appointed for the term of employment with NPCA as an officer pursuant to Section 28 of the Conservation Authorities Act, Regulation 155/6. It's been moved by Member Height and seconded by Member Greenwood. Any comments or questions? I'd like to, did you want to speak to this one in particular?
Unless there's any
okay.
questions, Mr.
Comments? Okay. Member Height? Oh, sorry. Member Gibson?
Just a comment. Our loss in Wainfleet is MPCA's gain. Jason just left us for the MPCA, so he's an excellent worker, good guy, so it's good for MPCA.
All right. With that endorsement, any other comments or questions? All those in favor? And that is carried. I just had your name down. I didn't know if you want to. I just had your name down. Maybe commenting on it. That's all. Okay. 6.2.9, that report FA 2619 respecting Niagara Region representation on the NPCA be received, and that correspondence from the Niagara Region dated March 1, 2019 be directed to the NPCA Governance Committee for consideration and recommendation to the April Board of Directors meeting. I have it moved by Member Encina and seconded by Member Zalepa. Any comments or questions? Member Height.
Yes, regarding the number of representation, that magic number that Niagara should have versus Hamilton and Halderman, when I had an opportunity to be at the office, I went through some of the archives in the vault, and in the 50s, 60s, there were 35 to 48 members of the NPCA board. It came down to about 18, but I'm not sure the exact date and what resolutions were made at that time. And I think that information should be reviewed by staff, and they could go year by year back in the 40s or go back maybe 12 years and then keep going back and find out when it changed to the current number. Because Niagara's number, if we go by the act, is, I believe, 27, something like that, and that would be just unworkable, having 27 people from Niagara and only 4 from Hamilton and 2 from Halderman. The old number of 1221 sound more reasonable, but we'll have to find out what the exact number is.
But anyways, having said that, he opened it. And so I just want to stay on point that we just recognize that the motion is before us. But go ahead, Member Johnson.
A quick comment. While you're going through your archives, find out where that agreement is about the money as well. That would be wonderful. So we'll do the 27, but we'll go back to the money. You got the yin and yang going here. You got to do one or the other. Anyways,
Yeah, and Member Beatty, did you want to weigh in?
I believe the number 12 comes out of the order in council, which is no longer valid. We are still waiting for our 3 municipalities to either come up with an agreement or go to the act or go to the ministry. And Hamilton is under the understanding that the makeup of the board is 5-4-2. That's the only legal opinion I've seen. I haven't seen any legal opinion from Niagara. If you have one, I'd really appreciate seeing it. Thank you.
Anyways, the motion that's before us. Any other comments or questions on the motion that's before us? Well, you have to say no. Seeing none. Yeah, careful what you asked for. Seeing none, all those in favor? And that is carried. Uh, 6.2.10, I have a motion before me that report FA 27-19 respecting the water quality improvement grants program be received. And 2, that staff be directed to prepare a detailed water quality improvement restoration program report for consideration at the April board meeting that meets with the intent of the Conservation Act mandate and the recommendation of the Auditor General's report, and that 3, staffing regarding the water quality improvement grants program be considered in the closed session at the March 20 meeting, so later on this meeting. I have it moved by Member Encina and seconded by Member Zalepa. Any comments or questions, Member Zalepa?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to draw attention to the background, second paragraph. The watershed report card, quality of surface water quality and forest condition received a D grade. So why I bring that up is I'm really excited with the new changes here to see what recommendations the senior staff here will have to move us into a more passing and acceptable figure. So I just want to draw that attention and give that support. So.
Okay, any other comments or thank you for those. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that is carried. I have a motion before me, 6.2.11, that report FA 28-19 respecting the Haldeman Lakefront landowners funding request pursuant to NPCA Water Quality Improvement Grant Program be received. Pardon me, and that board members authorize staff to fund this application up to the grant limit of $50,000. I have it moved by Member Encina and seconded by Member Zalepa. Any comments or questions? Member Height.
Maybe the members from Halderman would like to speak before me? No? Fine. The grant up to $50,000, is it being split 4 ways between Halderman, the NPCA, the residents, and maybe the province or the feds? When we looked at that map that our acting CAO showed, it showed a small sliver of property that is adjacent to Lake Erie, but the waterfront along Lake Erie, the waterfront along Lake Ontario, and the river could be offered a similar help through this grant, I believe, if it's for water quality. The report, and if you're reading the report, it doesn't speak to water quality. In my mind, what water quality is, I think there's a statement in here that suggests that it isn't issue. It won't help the water quality by spending money, investing money in protecting the lakefront. And if we do it here, there's properties I know in Niagara and especially in St. Catharines where residents had issues with erosion. They paid out of their own pocket to bring rocks in to protect the waterfront in front of their property along Lake Ontario. And my concern is if we offer it here to landowners, not to the community, but to the landowners to protect their property, does that offer and open the door across both lakes and the river, and how much this is going to cost if we start the process? And I'd like to hear from the CAO because my concern is, I know there's a 50-50, but maybe it should even be more than a 50-50 split because we're talking community, we're talking NPCA, we're talking specific landowners who will benefit from this.
I'm going to pass that over to the CAO then.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would also, before I answer that or address the question from Member Height, I would like to reference that our Director of Watershed Management would have a more familiar background on this one and can address that issue of cost share split. That's certainly something that the board can direct staff on. I just would like to, protecting our Great Lakes shoreline is a challenge. There is absolutely no doubt about that. And for any conservation authority to try and address the protection of the shoreline and fund that is quite an impossible challenge, I would say. I would like to ask the staff to address why they think this is worthy of having a financial contribution, but I would also like to address the issue of shoreline erosion and water quality. I actually personally agree with you, Member Height. I believe that when it comes to erosion, what is the largest problem right now in Lake Erie, and thankfully for us not in this part of the basin, is phosphorus and nutrient loading. And when it comes to phosphorus, it comes from many sources, and we can talk about that in the future. But one of the sources is phosphorus attaches itself to soil particles. So when you have erosion going into either riverine systems or directly into the lake, it will discharge phosphorus. What we don't know, of course, is how much phosphorus loading is coming in from particular erosion problems, particularly on the Great Lake. But by and large, I agree with you that there is a water quality issue related to erosion control problems. So I thought I would address that to start with. And then, Mr. Chair, if I can kindly turn it over to the Director of Watershed Management to address why this project would be worthy of contribution, I would appreciate that.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. This was a project that there was actually some debate whether or not it should or should not, because it doesn't meet, as it states in the report, doesn't meet the intent of the current Water Quality Improvement Grant Program. At the same time, we're looking at a long stretch, almost 3 kilometers of shoreline, where the landowners have all banded together through a community club, the Dunnville Rotary Club, with the community, County of Haldimand to seek funding through the NPCA. A promise was granted to the landowners previously that they would seek, that the NPCA would provide monetary compensation to this, not to the amount that we've put forward because the grant limit is $50,000. But at the same time, it's really, we're just trying to seek direction from the board. Do you agree that that's something that Conservation Storage should be looking at on a case-by-case scenario, not for an individual property? We are looking at long stretches where people are working together to do a more communal system as opposed to individual landowner.
Well, follow up to staff. He mentioned a promise. Well, individuals around either staff or the board cannot make promises. It's the board that makes decisions. So someone can make any kind of promise they'd like. It's very clear in the report. Staff note that lakefront erosion control projects do not meet the goal of the Water Quality Improvement Grant Program, which is to improve the quality of water within the watercourse. So I'm reading that, and then on the front page you're saying, well, let's grant them $50,000. The recommendation would be, if board feels this is important, there should be a $50,000 grant, but they're saying it doesn't meet the qualifications. And it's interesting, and I'm not sure what the city or the town of Haldimand's done, or the county's done, the community's done. Are they sharing with the landowners? And I know it's a big bill. They're talking millions of dollars. And this is just for the study, but I would assume they should have gone to their council and said, we need your help. And that should have been the 50-50 funding and not the NPCA. That's my feeling, so I can't support this $50,000.
I'm going to go to CAO to answer your questions there, though.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through to Member Height. In a perfect world, this would probably not have been, or may have been better deferred for a future meeting. However, the board direction at the February meeting was to have this report in front of the board. And that's why it's here. I think what the desire of staff would be is we really would love to take a look at the Water Quality Grant Improvement Program. Fundamentally, I think the staff think it is an exceptionally good program, and it seemed to have been perhaps discontinued in around January of this year, at which I was not present for that decision. What we would really like to take a look at is the Water Quality Improvement Grant Program. Bring those recommendations back to you. Perhaps the Haldimand Lakefront landowners funding request is premature, and the board might want to consider that in the whole, under the whole auspices of taking a look again at the Water Quality Grant Improvement Program. And if it appears that this might be a better staff report to have deferred until after we can consider the water quality program, then perhaps that's a better course of action for the board, so that you can look at this project under perhaps new guidelines for the water quality program. And that might be a better recommendation on a course forward.
Okay. I have member Encina next.
Thank you, Chair. First, I believe you're right. This should be deferred. Because if you would ask me right now, I would suggest to you I'm in the same vein as Board Member Height. We're going to open up a can of worms. If you look at the area of Fort Erie, look at all the shoreline in Fort Erie, and look at the money people have invested in their shoreline. They've done it themselves. So what we're saying to them then is if we go ahead with this, then if you get together as a group and put a project forward, you're going to get $50,000 or whatever kind of money to spend on your shoreline. I think we're going into some waters that are really treacherous right now if we go down that. Do you like that?
Yeah, that was clever.
That was funny.
Okay.
I would like to make that motion that we defer this.
Okay.
And
So we have a deferral motion before us. A seconder? Okay.
Chair, we spoke to it, so we can't defer.
No, that's right.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
No, I would like,
Yes.
yes.
Okay, so I'm going to go to Member Gibson.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and through you. I side with Councillor Height in one respect that, there's definitely a disconnect in stabilizing the shoreline and the quality of water. There's some connection there, but there's much more of a disconnect that I see. Secondly, this grant, and I was down that area not very long ago having a look. There's many areas along the shore of Wainfleet and all the way to Fort Erie that not now, but in the future, are constantly being threatened by the big storms that we have. And ice push up in Fort Erie, we had some of that along one of our roads in Wainfleet as well, right up into a cottage. So there's all sorts of issues that could surface here as time goes on, and we have to be careful about setting precedents for sure. So, thank you.
I have Member Kiokio.
Mr. Chair, I was going to defer this back to staff, but I know Member Shurton really wants to talk to us, so I'll yield the floor, and then if you can come back to me.
Yeah. Okay. Member Shurton.
Yeah, thanks. And just to give the new members here, I know Member Beatty was here. This all rose. The water levels on Lake Erie, if anybody lives out there, the water levels are go in cycles. And right now the water level is high. Just to give you information, the cottagers out there, many actually own in Niagara and Hamilton, and this is a secondary property. So it would benefit even Niagara being down here. But because of the fact of the 3 kilometers, and it isn't just one, many owners out there already have break walls. But the problem is some in between don't. Anybody knows how a break wall works. If there's cracks or if there's interruptions of it, it's inefficient. So they've banded together, which is great, to try to get 30, 40, 50 landowners in agreement is a big task. They came here last year. Last spring we had an amazing, crazy winds and a storm that caused a lot of this damage, which brought this more to the forefront. They're currently, and I know Member Height wants to know what Haldeman's is, they're currently going through and doing some improvements. One guy bought the road allowance of Haldeman County, and he's trucking stone there currently to patch up the one spot. So we are taking on, it's a half-load season currently, so there is potential road damage. Haldeman County, through our Vibrancy Fund of Ward 5, is going to basically compensate and fix that road if need be. So we are also going to cost in this remedy of fixing this break wall. I do agree that probably it might be a bit premature. I appreciate Darren McKenzie's willingness to bring it forward today because I asked, but knowing that this doesn't really fit the water quality, I can see some reasons why it should be supported. But again, maybe a little more information from staff and having it deferred is probably a good idea. So I'll just leave my comments at that.
Member Kiokio.
I'll defer it back to staff.
Okay, so we just have a deferral motion seconded by Member Steele. All those in favor? And that's been deferred. Yep. Steele. Okay. I'm just going to put that on the pile, but I wrote that on there. Good too. Okay, moving right along. I have a motion before me that report FA 2919 be received for information that Board of Directors endorse the staff initiated appeal to the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal, LPAT, of the decision of the Committee of Adjustment for the City of Port Colborne regarding severance applications B05-19-PC and the B06-19-PC. I have it moved by Member Zalepa and seconded by Member Wright. Any comments or questions? Member Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the CAO. only because this does involve Port Colborne, but I think I'm going to speak in behalf of all municipalities that deal with the NPCA and also with their own communities, whether it's Haldeman, Hamilton, or the Niagara region. I served for 10 years on the Committee of Adjustment in Port Colborne. I just finished my term in January with a changeover from the election. This issue here has been ongoing for at least those 10 years I was involved, where at the 11th hour we were receiving information from the NPCA and the Niagara region with regards to development within our community. And I'm sure this is not new to any other community within the watershed. So I'm glad this morning when I spoke to Gail that we've come to some conclusion on this with regards to they are speaking with the developer so that they won't have to proceed to LPAT, and that they can come up to an agreement that fits with both the NPCA and the development that's going on. But my concern is that on the January the 29th, the NPCA's comments came in at 10:19 a.m. The region's comments came in at 3:45 p.m. There were pre-consultation meetings with both organizations prior to the meeting, which this issue was not brought up. So for it to come at the 11th hour, I think it's hard for committees of adjustment to make an informed decision. Most times the Committee of Adjustment won't look to those and include them in their recommendations in general. Sometimes we do, but most times we don't, because the information is so late, and even the developers, or whether it's a single family home that's doing something that has to have a comment on it, they don't have time to absorb this. If it had come to us even the week before, it could have been sent out to the committee, also with the developer in this case, where they could have actually asked for a deferral, so that we don't need to go to LPAT, we don't need to do all the, to be quite honest, red tape wasting of time, that this could have been dealt with within the next month, and it come back to the Committee of Adjustment with the right recommendations at that time that everybody agrees to. So, and I know going forward, the CAO would has assured me that this organization will get those comments back in a more timely fashion so that everyone involved can make the right decision. So I do appreciate that. So if you could assure us of that.
Yes, very briefly, and thank you, Member Steele, for being considerate of the position that we were in. We are just finishing hiring 2 more additional watershed planners. We only have 2 planners right now commenting on municipal applications for the entire watershed. So we're a little short-staffed, and that means that that sometimes our comments arrive more at the 11th hour. It shouldn't be that way. We absolutely concur with you, and certainly I know that the Director of Watershed Management is going to look into more timely comments on all of our applications.
Thank you.
Apologies, keeps popping off there. That report, FA 30-19, respecting the 2019 full authority meeting dates, be received. That April 17 meeting date be changed at the March board meeting in order to invite the Auditor General to the April meeting. 3, that staff be directed to poll board members to determine the best date and time for future board meetings. I have it moved by Member Salepa, and I'm looking for a seconder. Vice Chair Houston. Any comments or questions? Member Shurton.
Well, knowing it does impact 3 municipalities in general here. I guess there's other budget meetings, other meetings that happen. Is there a different day that we're looking for? Or are we looking for an evening, an afternoon? I'm just curious to know what the challenge is going to be, and I'm thinking we're always going to have some conflict. So I guess that's the question I'm asking.
So I'll entertain an answer to that, and it's just quite simply at this point, we've received quite a few concerns from various board members that this particular time slot is not conducive because of other engagement that they have. coupled with the fact that we're trying to coordinate a time slot where the board can hear the report from the Auditor General herself, who conducted the report. We're trying to find an intersection with the most amount of members and this and the Auditor General. So, and then taking into consideration concerns expressed by some of the members who are not present and as you know, are leaving. So we're trying to, so the staff will be directed to poll and try to find that best intersection. And I know it's a challenge, and of course, you know, there are 30 odd moving parts to this, but they're going to do their best. At this point, it's at the scheduled time, but we're trying to see if we can get a better representation, and also include the, of course, Auditor General.
Well, in knowing that, so I guess my question is, does evening work better, or is a different day better? Like, that's what I'm not sure of. Is it the Wednesday morning that's the problem?
The simple answer is that that's what the board's going to find out. We might be pleasantly surprised, and we'll leave it at that. Any comments, Member Beattie?
Whatever we do, it's only good until June, right? Then we're going to have to do it again.
Yeah. More specifically, it's
council meetings always dictate the meeting for the NPCA. There's nothing new about this. Get used to it. It happens.
And Member Height?
Why not just ask around, are Thursdays an issue? Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays seem to be. Are Thursdays an issue?
Just to that.
Every day's an issue. Okay.
Yeah. The challenge is there's people missing who would love to weigh into that, so all this is doing is directing staff to find the best intersection for the 30 odd members and the players that are required. So, any other comments or questions? Oh yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The most important comment is the direction to staff from the chair and the vice chair is they would like the Auditor General invited to the April meeting. We do know that if you keep this time slot for the April meeting, there will be at least 4 members that cannot make it due to other municipal committee meetings. So all that this staff needs direction on is, do we keep this meeting for April? Do we go to an afternoon meeting same day, or an evening meeting the same day? Because, and maybe the Auditor General can't make it anyway when we get the invitation, but staff need to know when the April meeting is going to be, and if it's on this day, great, because we need to immediately get an invitation out to the Auditor General.
Okay, yes. Member Shurton.
So, you know what, and Gail, I love your comments there, but to me, we're putting the cart in front of the horse. We should have maybe checked in with the Auditor General for that day to see if she's even available, and if afternoon or evening, we can make the switch here and she's still not available. I think we need to reach out to her, and then I don't know what we do from there.
Yeah. Okay. So the staff will put that together, and we will we'll come back. So watch your inbox. Any other comments or questions? Meeting dates always take as much time. All those in favor? And that's carried, but looking a little lackluster. Are we tired, or are we? Okay. 6.2.14, moved by Scratch and, I think that's Whalen. Yeah, this is what you're saying. Yeah. Moved by Member Whalen, seconded by Member Steele. Whereas the provincial government intends to increase the supply of housing and streamline the land use planning and development approval process to achieve this goal. And whereas the conservation authorities play an important role in the planning and development review process with respect to watershed protection and hazard lands. And whereas conservation authorities support and can deliver the government's objective not to jeopardize public health and safety or the environment, be it therefore resolved that Report FA 31-19 meeting provincial priorities for reducing regulatory burden be received. 2, that the NPCA Board of Directors endorse 3 key solutions developed by the Conservation Ontario Working Group to improve client service and accountability, increase speed of approvals, and reduce red tape and regulatory burden. And 3, that staff be directed to work with Conservation Ontario and our clients to identify additional improvements and further. And 4, that staff be directed to implement these solutions as soon as possible. I have a mover, Whalen, seconded by Member Steele. Comments or questions? Member Zalepa?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm generally, very supportive of this, but I did want to add and be considered for an amendment that we would staff be directed to work with Conservation Ontario and our clients and local area municipalities. I think they need to be included there, and I want to make a comment to that if I could get a seconder on that.
Okay, so seconder on the amendment, Member Height, and that's just to include local.
And just to speak on that, I want to refer to a process that's occurring at the region of Niagara. Currently, we spoke earlier about the MOU, and I just want to give the public and people paying attention to our meeting that indeed that's not something that's just fallen off the face of the earth. The Niagara Regional Planning Committee meets this afternoon at 1 o'clock. And on our agenda is the MOU. So I just want to make sure the local area municipalities are included here, and that the public knows we're all working together to make sure all this works really well. So that would be great if we could move that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you, Member Johnson. I have a motion before me. 6.2.15. That report, FA 35-19, regarding the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Foundation be received, that NPCA board members blank and blank be appointed to the NPCF board until December 31st, 2019 to ensure that 2018-2019 foundation reporting is completed and to review the status of the NPCF with the interim CAO ST, that NPCA board members appointed to the foundation report results of the review to the NPCA, and that the board members appointed to the foundation and the NPCA interim CAO offer their services to the foundation on a voluntary basis until the future of the foundation can be reported to the NPCA board of directors. I have a mover by Member Steele and seconded by Member Whalen.
Clarification on that, Mr. Chair. Apologies. That report was directed to go out only after the board agenda was circulated. It was circulated via email.
Yep.
My deepest apologies. As I said, it is not normal practice that a report would go out like this, but it was, the CAO was directed to send this out on Friday. Given that some board members don't have the report, Mr. Chair, certainly staff and the board members that were involved in this matter can take a moment if the board members wish to review the situation.
Member Johnson.
Thank you. I'm only really familiar with the Hamilton Foundation, and I've never seen a foundation that's had so much input from the Conservation Authority itself. So that's one of my concerns. The foundation that's in Hamilton is basically, it's based on citizen involvement. So I'm just wondering, is this just on an interim basis to get them over a hump and then turn it over to the public, which it should be? Yeah. Or is this a permanent solution? I just need some clarity.
So I'm going to hand the floor to the CAO to answer those questions and concerns.
Thank you. And I do see, thank you, Mr. Chair, another board member that's very knowledgeable on this. You're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. Most foundations have 2 to 3 board members from the Conservation Authority appointed to the foundation board. It is not the majority vote. And that is simply because most conservation foundations raise funds for conservation authority, the Conservation Authority. So right now, the foundation of Niagara needs 2 board members appointed to it from the authority to make a legally constituted foundation board because there is only one member left on the foundation, and they are a member now of the public. Normally, so to get the board of the foundation legally constituted, we need 2 board members from this authority to volunteer to work with the one member of the foundation and myself to bring a report back to the authority on the future of the foundation.
Okay, thank you for that clarity.
I want to go to Vice Chair Houston. Did you?
Yeah, I just wanted to nominate Tom Encina and Rob Foster. Rob Foster.
And that's been seconded by Member Height. No discussion.
Just clarification, if I may, Mr. Chair, on that. When the resolution was put forward that 2 board members' names be offered for the foundation to help them and assist them, Member Encina, my apologies, sir, and Member Foster did volunteer. I'm sure if there are other board members sitting around the table that would love to have their name considered, we can consider that right now. But those 2 board members volunteered, and they clearly know that they are not getting any remuneration for sitting on the foundation. Just to be clear. Thank you.
Member Encina, do you just want to weigh in here? Or you're, we thank
Sure.
you.
I guess it's something that had to be done, and there is a distinction between the authority and the foundation. That was being lost, and I think that has to come back where there is the 2 distinctions, and the separation has to be there. There was I think it went through. How's the best way to put this? There was a bit of turmoil. I'll leave it at that. So this is kind of getting them back on track, and hopefully by December or before that, there will be a report back and a process that we're going to go through, looking to the general public, saying, okay, we need your assistance. Who are the best people qualified to be on the foundation? There are other ramifications that had to come into consideration with regards to CRA rules, with regards to money that were in trust, because there are things that had to be done legally. So in order to do that, you had to have 3 people minimum to actually do that and keep it afloat. Am I right, Renee? Am I right? Mm-hmm. So, and that's kind of the reason why we didn't want it to go into an abeyance, because if that happens, there's all kinds of paperwork and you know what hits the fan, kind of thing.
Thank you very much, Member Encina. Any other Member Johnson?
Yeah, sorry. So just to thanks for the clarity, but I also just wanted to reiterate. So the board members that will be sitting on this that have volunteered today, is this an interim situation where where finally the public will have, because my understanding through the Auditor General's report was that there was it was too gray of an area between the foundation and the NPCA. So I thought we were trying to get that dividing line down so that would be no more gray area.
Yeah, that's what's happening now by doing this. So that by having 2 members from the board there, of a board that may consist of 10 to 12 people.
Right.
It's like 1/6 of the population of that board. So there really is no real control, but it's there as I would suggest, a reference back to the NPCA. We're the sort of, if you can call it, the conduit.
Right.
Back and forth. This will
turn your
end
microphone
by.
off.
This will appointment per se would only go till about December, if not before that, when things are back on track.
Okay, so that's
and
great.
I'm more than willing to pull back.
The magic words for me is to get the public more involved in this. And
Absolutely.
I can appreciate that there's been a
the
domino
goal.
effect from what's been happening in this organization, and the domino effect just didn't just go, it went beyond these
Yep.
walls. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, All those in favor? And that's carried. Moving on to 7, we're going to in camera, so I have a motion that closed session agenda items be added to address the recommendation of CAO Selection Committee regarding the retention of a recruiting firm. I'm looking for a mover, Member Johnson, seconded by Member Metcalf. Any comments or discussions? All those in favor? And that's carried. I have a motion before me that the meeting of the Board of Directors of the NPCA convene in closed session at 11:35 in accordance with Section 11.1 of the NPCA Administrative Bylaw for the discussion of matters relating to a proposed or pending acquisition of land by NPCA in the vicinity of Binbrook Conservation Area, personnel matters about an identifiable individual, including NPCA employers, and labor relations, human resource, employee negotiations. Mover, I have moved by Member Johnson, seconded by Member Metcalf. Yep.
I'm actually missing a meeting right now at City Hall, so I would like to request that we stick with the agenda, that the Binbrook Conservation Authority come up first so that I can exit out. Thank you.
Okay. All those in favor of going into close, and that is carried.
I'm missing a meeting and I'm going to one. I'm out of here.
We're just going to secure the room for a second, and then we'll